Severa Report, Old Bile in New Bottle. Written by Nitin Sawant. Plato once postulated on the darkness in life. We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. The logical question arises here. Why are men afraid of the light? Is it because it opens their eyes to a new luminous world? Is it because it offers them a bold new perspective or a fresh interpretation of their unresolved issues, forcing them into action? Or is it simply because it forces them to confront the unvarnished reality, whose acceptance questions their very set of life's principles and limiting beliefs? The new Severa Report on the Global Vishwa Hindu Parishad (VHP) is a similar case in point, wherein the insecurities and fears of a clique of pseudo-liberals are laid out, intermeshed with a pack of lies, confabulation of innuendos, a whole bunch of he-said-she-said watercooler gossip, slanderous accusations, and a wholesale misrepresentation of events galore. And all of this is backed by a cabal of slippery customers that have already been proven to be as dodgy as the report itself. No wonder they could not find even one self-respecting intellectual with an India-specific domain of expertise to front this hogwash of a report and had to bring in a bunch of Hamas sympathizers, BLM washouts, and peddlers of unchecked immigration into the U.S. to dignify this ignominy by putting their names on it. Severa Report, a house of cards. It would have been funny if it was not so tragic that every left-liberal report on India, Hinduism, VHP, RSS, and the BJP has to be based on the same set of lies that have been thoroughly debunked repeatedly over the last 2 decades. So much so that courts in India have passed severe strictures and punished the traffickers of these lies, on which the entire Severa Report is postulated. It is probably the testimony to the poor IQ or lack of imagination of these leftist cabals that we see the same cock-and-bull stories repeatedly regurgitated to make a case against India's rise as a global economy. To contradict every lie from the Severa Report would be an exercise in futility. So let's stick to a few key points that completely puncture its narrative. For starters, they open the report with a lament of how India has recently been downgraded to an electoral autocracy by the VDEM Institute and to a status of partly free by Freedom House. Now, shouldn't that be a matter of worry? It would have been if the reports and the organizations pushing these reports had an iota of credibility. The VDEM nonsense. The VDEM report from Sweden that berates India's Hindu nationalist government for the fall in their democracy rankings comes to you courtesy of a George Soros mouthpiece. That itself tarnishes the report's integrity completely. Furthermore, the countries rated at the top, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland, all have Christianity as their state religion. It's funny how VDEM implies that their Christian nationalist governments are oh so democratic, but a Hindu nationalist one can't be democratic at all. Then again, this VDEM report is based on the opinions of a grand total of 25 people, out of which 8 are foreigners. Imagine a report on a country of 1.5 billion is rated via a casual conversation between 25 friends from within the same echo chamber. The entire process smacks of envy where a bunch of entitled wannabes bemoans over a democracy of a surging economy that has passed them by. Forget VDEM. The Freedom House report is in itself a matter of joke within the leftist academic circles. In 1988, Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman wrote how it had long served as a virtual propaganda arm of the government and the international right wing. To Andrei Tsigankov, now of San Francisco State University, and David Parker of King's College in London, Freedom House reflects foreign policy priorities of certain groups within the American establishment. Among these groups, security elites with neoconservative convictions stand out. In 2012, Nils Steiner of the University of Mainz showed Freedom House tends to rate U.S. allies as freer than other nations. Indeed, these so-called ratings and reports that power the Severa Report themselves are not free from their prejudices and bigotry. For a scathing critique of these self-appointed international rating agencies, read Professor Salvatore Baboni's Indian Democracy at 75. Who are the barbarians at the gate? Love jihad. Then cometh the big whammy of the conspiracy theory of love jihad. Among the concepts popularized by Hindu supremacist leaders are love jihad, a conspiracy theory claiming that Muslim men are conspiring to lure away Hindu women in order to forcibly convert them to Islam, pontificates the Severa Report. Now this could have been a potent allegation against Hindu leaders, except for the fact that the genesis of the concept of love jihad in India is the former Kerala Chief Minister and Communist Party of India Marxist stalwart V.S. Akuthanandan, who went on record in 2010, warning about the impending objective of Muslim fundamentalists, including the Popular Front of India, PFI, to turn Kerala into a Muslim state. Their plan is to make Kerala a Muslim state in the next 20 years. For that, they are luring youngsters, offering them money and insisting them to marry Hindu girls to increase the Muslim population. This is how they are growing their majority, and these tricks are working, he expressed. If Savera had invested a minute on some casual research on Google, they could have discovered that the biggest fight back against love jihad is led by the church in India. In his pastoral letter to be read in local churches on Easter last year, Metropolitan Archbishop Mar Joseph Pamplani of Thalassery Archdiocese, Syro-Malabar Church in Kerala, expressed his serious concerns over the matter, which he called love traps, love jihad. He appealed for their prevention in light of the worrisome increase in incidents of naive Christian girls being tricked by Muslim men who coerce them into love traps. Besides love jihad, the issue of narcotic jihad was also covered by Pala Bishop Mar Joseph Kalarangat in his sermon in the Kottayam area in September 2021, where he stated that by claiming to be in love, jihadis entrap and then expose Christian females to exploitation, coerce conversion to another religion, Islam, and terrorist activities. And what does the good bishop think of outfits like Savera, who deny the very existence of any such phenomena? Well, in 2020, the bishop declared that those who argued that love jihad doesn't exist in Kerala are blind to reality. Such people, be they politicians or those from social and cultural spaces, or media, may have their vested interests. And where exactly does India's nationalistic Hindu government come into the picture here? Well, in 2020, Vice President of the National Minority Commission, George Kurian, had implored the Home Minister of India, Amit Shah, to order a detailed probe by a central agency into such love jihad cases. So much for VHP and BJP raising the love jihad bugbear. The Savera report is so unhinged when it comes to attacking the majority Hindus for their alleged indiscriminate bigotry towards all the minorities in India that it keeps lapsing into a brain fog over who exactly is a majority or minority. Take the case where it launches a rant on Vishnu Shankar Jain, branding him as a far-right lawyer leading a virulent campaign that calls for the conversion of multiple mosques and buildings, including the Taj Mahal, into Hindu temples. If only their intentions were honest, and if only they had taken a bit of pain to consult a self-respecting Indian over this matter, they would have discovered to their surprise that Mr. Jain is not exactly a Hindu. He comes from the Indic Jain microminority, which boasts of an independent set of worshipping rituals and religious places that are quite different from conventional Hinduism. Besides, what Savera wantonly describes as attacks on Muslim places of worship by Mr. Jain are actually some of the most stringently evaluated, hard-fought formal legal cases filed in the highest courts of India for justice against the desecration and dispossession of the holiest of Hindu worship sites by the Islamic invaders. So-called Islamophobia. Even a cursory read of the Savera report gives you the impression that Savera needs to refresh its understanding of the rules of engagement of any debate. For instance, they contrive to squirm about VHPA's alleged virulent anti-Muslim rhetoric conscientiously, and yet fail to offer a single logical argument to counter the globally growing anti-Islamism sentiment. Can Savera deny the horror that the Hamas Islamists unleashed on the innocent Jewish womenfolk and kids in Israel on October 7th? Can they ever square up to the world at large and justify how innocent women were molested, beaten up, paraded naked, and then killed or taken hostage by the Islamists on October 7th? How does Savera propose to rationalize Hamas' modus operandi of filming and live transmitting these very inhuman acts on the internet for the stunned world to watch and weep? But since Savera's vitriol is India-specific, how does Savera plan to account for the recent murder of 2 innocent kids in Badon, Uttar Pradesh, where a couple of Islamist brothers chose to slit the throat of the kids and proceeded to drink their blood on the eve of the holy Ramadan month? The only reason for the Islamists to hack these kids to death was that they were students of an RSS-run school, and that the kids were regular participants in cultural dramas based on Hindu epics. Furthermore, when one of the murdering brothers was shot down by the police, his funeral was attended by 30,000 of his co-religionists, who simply did not believe that the cold-blooded murderers had done anything wrong. What is Savera's excuse for this horrific behavior of an entire Islamist community? You can consult any self-respecting psychologist with these examples, and she will openly admit that the rest of the world might have a good reason to worry about the very people Savera chooses to defend brazenly. No wonder Severa's tirade on the supposed virulent anti-Muslim rhetoric falls flat on its face when all it dishes up is a word salad of CAA and NRC distortions without a single compelling citation that takes on the said rhetoric. 2002 Gujarat riots. Of course, none of these anti-India, anti-Hindu reports are ever complete before the leftist hacks fall back on their recurrent pet trope of the 2002 Gujarat riots when the current Indian PM Narendra Modi was the state's chief minister. Again, Severa could have benefited or stayed closer to the truth if they had done some casual research on not only their facts and figures but also the exact Supreme Court rulings and the current status of all the parties supposedly involved in the 2002 riots before casting aspersions on the BJP, RSS, or the VHP. For starters, not many are aware that the court proceedings of the 2002 riots were pursued for 16 long years, where several attempts were made by the left ecosystem and the Congress government in power then, to discredit Narendra Modi, BJP, RSS, VHP, and Hindus at large, hoping to brand them as aggressors. Unfortunately for them, their every single attempt failed to nail any down evidence that proves BJP's or VHP's active connivance with the rioters, and the apprehensive court eventually dismissed all the allegations, deeming that several applications against Narendra Modi were filed to keep the pot boiling for ulterior design. Giving a clean chit to the Gujarat administration, the bench noted that there was no material worth the name to even create a suspicion of criminal conspiracy. The court did not just dismiss all the highfalutin conspiracy theories that are now featured in the Severa report. It also noted how the structure of a larger criminal conspiracy at the highest level has been erected on false claims, and the same stands collapsed like a house of cards, in the aftermath of a thorough investigation. Yes, whether it's the Bharatiya Janata Party or the Vishwa Hindu Parishad or even the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, all the orgs that the Severa report raves and rants against, none of them were incriminated for any criminal activity at the organizational level. Did the Severa report make it a point to quote the Supreme Court on the 2002 riots? Not at all. But they went on to quote discredited NGOs and human rights organizations who had played a bigger role in keeping the pot boiling. Well, the Supreme Court had a thing or two to say about such people. As a matter of fact, all those involved in such abusive process need to be in the dock. Most of these so-called human rights activists, including Thista Setlavad and ex-cop R.B. Srikumar, have been doing rounds of jail for conspiring to abuse the process of law by fabricating false evidence and instituting false and malicious criminal proceedings against innocent people. However, truth is inconsequential for ragsheets like the Severa report, whose authors probably wrote the conclusion of their wishy-washy report first, blaming the VHP, RSS, and BJP, and then went backward cherry-picking quotes and figures to justify their ending. Then again, Hindu-hating organizations like Severa have so badly trivialized and overexploited the 2002 riots to such an extent that today, even the local Muslims of Gujarat treat these activists with a contempt typically reserved for blood-sucking leeches, blaming them for mooching a living off their tragedies. And while the 2002 riots always find a mention in almost all the Hinduphobic reports of the left, as a sometime resident of Ahmedabad, I can testify to the fact that the 2002 issue has zero traction on the ground there, with practically zero Hindu-Muslim riots happening post-2002. Also, a curious point is that, unlike rabble-rousers like Severa, none of the opposition political parties have dared to make the riots a local electoral issue since 2002. However, what is fascinating is the tendency of 2002 exploiters to bandy around riot extremities without ever referring to the origins and cause of such a tumultuous event. Under the watch of Narendra Modi, then serving as chief minister of the state, a pogrom took place in Gujarat in 2002, with targeted and coordinated violence against Muslims. Muslims were killed en masse and cleansed from entire neighborhoods and subject to targeted lootings and horrific instances of sexual violence and torture. In total, nearly 2,000 people, mostly Muslims, were killed. Postures Severa sanctimoniously. Do they even mention the horrific Godhra carnage that preceded it, where 59 Hindu pilgrims were burnt to death in the Sabarmati Express train in a premeditated assault by a gang of Islamists? Somehow, this trigger point for the 2002 flare-up always goes missing in such biased coverage. Why? Simply because it correctly contextualizes the entire 2002 fracas as a natural hot-headed reaction to the Godhra massacre, while making Islamist rioters look like senseless instigators and provocateurs with jihadist antecedents. The carefully choreographed Hindus as bad guys mendacity crashes under the weight of its fabrication with the very mention of Godhra. And that's exactly why partisan report makers like Severa rely on half-truths rather than the harsh truth. Again, a similar jaundiced template is seen in the case of Savera's allegation on VHP's involvement in the Babri Masjid demolition case of 1992, where it again cherry-picks selective comments from the much-maligned Liberan Commission. The Liberan Commission was instituted in 1992 after the Babri Masjid demolition. It was supposed to submit its fact-finding report in a matter of months. Instead, it took 17 years and 48 extensions to submit what is now infamously known as the Liberan farce, which has been thoroughly trashed in various op-eds as neither fair nor impartial, nor objective, only self-contradictory. The only purpose that this report served was to appease the Congress Party's minority vote bank of Muslims, as selective portions were leaked to the press on the eve of an assembly election. Naturally, the case languished in the courts till the current CM Yogi Adityanath showed great speed in translating thousands of pages of case documents within 10 months for the trial in Supreme Court to begin in 2020. As expected, the court poked holes in the various theories proposed in the Liberan report. Eventually, it acquitted all the 32 accused for the demolition, compelling Yogi Adityanath to react to the political nature of this entire escapade. This judgment makes it clear that the former Congress government implicated senior BJP leaders and saints in the case out of political reasons and for vote bank politics. Does the Savera report mention that none of the BJP or VHP leaders were found guilty of any wrongdoing in this case? Nope. Does the Savera report mention the unassailable fact that the courts lauded VHP chief Ashok Singhal for his efforts to prevent the demolition? No, again. Does the Savera report tell you about the contradictory witness accounts, as many were not even present at the scene, or how the video evidence was edited and tampered with before being presented to the court? Most importantly, does the Savera report tell you how the Supreme Court eventually handed over the alleged disputed premises to the Hindus after a century-long legal battle, and that a new temple dedicated to Lord Ram has come up at the exact same venue via funds donated voluntarily by Hindu faithful across the world after it was conclusively proven in the court that the said premises belonged to the Hindus? Not at all. CAA and Delhi riots. Although Savera does not stop at just misrepresenting the facts in old cases, it also spins an anti-Muslim narrative to the recent Delhi riots, which have been wholly anti-Hindu, marking the culmination of the hostility, hatred, and anger spread by the anti-CAA protests by the Islamists in Shaheen Bagh and other areas in Delhi. Again, the Savera report fails to mention the ongoing court proceeding, where the court observed that the sole aim of the Islamist mobs, guided by communal feelings, was to cause maximum damage to the properties belonging to the people of the Hindu community. Once again, Savera tries to highlight selective comments from the fringe to give a false color to the carnage unleashed on hapless Delhi citizens by the Islamists. How the Islamic world sees India. All said, one can blow through the entire Savera duplicity by posing one single question. If the brutality against minorities that Savera is alleging is happening in India, then wouldn't the Islamic world censure and cancel India, PM Modi, BJP, and the VHP globally? Wouldn't Hindus and all their orgs, including the VHP and RSS, be taken to task by the diplomats belonging to the Muslim nations? Yes, logically they should, except that they don't. On the contrary, the Islamic world has given zero credence to all such flatulence masquerading as intelligence that is being put up by the likes of Savera. Contrary to what the Savera report insists, the Islamic world has gone the whole hog to honor PM Modi, bestowing him with their top accolades. Indeed, out of the 13 highest civilian awards bestowed on PM Modi, 6 have been from staunch Islamic countries, ranging from Saudi Arabia to Palestine. Maybe these Islamic nations had the sagacity to go beyond the paid propaganda of pamphleteers like Savera and bank on some actual concrete research that pointed out how 89% of Muslims felt free to practice their religion in India, as did 91% of Hindus, 89% of Christians, 82% of Sikhs, 93% of Buddhists, 85% of Jains, and 91% of the overall Indian population. What delusional outfits like Savera can never get is that it's purely due to the unsullied nature of the Hindu organizations like the VHP, RSS, and the BJP that Hindu saints have been invited to build mammoth temples in various Islamic nations that had hitherto rebuffed even the very idea of idol worship in their lands. Reversing the gaze. The fatal error that anarchist outfits like Savera typically make is that they rely on dubious partner organizations to validate their drivel. The choice of organizations Savera decides to partner with shows their propensity to resort to exaggerated fake news. To corroborate their pack of lies, Savera chooses to bring in the Indian American Muslim Council, IAMC, and Hindus for Human Rights, HFHR. A set of intertwined organizations with deep umbilical connections to the world's most dangerous terror networks. No wonder that their Twitter/X accounts have been banned in India. According to the Hindu American Foundation, HAF, the IAMC has links with the banned Islamic terror outfit, Students Islamic Movement of India, SIMI. And this is beside their ties with Pak-based U.S.-designated foreign terrorist organization, Lashkar-e-Taiba, LET, and Jamaat-e-Islami, JEI, through its founder Sheikh Ubaid. Yes, the IAMC is a Jamaat-e-Islami-backed lobbyist organization pretending to be a rights advocacy group. In the past, it had reportedly collaborated with and even paid money to various groups in the USA to get India blacklisted by the USCIRF, United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Besides, IAMC has been caught spreading fake news and misinformation to further the Islamist cause in India and has also been slapped with the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA, since 2021. Then again, Hindus for Human Rights, HFHR, is the same organization that was also seen endorsing the Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference. Sunita Vishwanath, the co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights and a known pawn of George Soros' Open Society Foundation, had also tried to create hysteria and panic among Indian Muslims about the National Register of Citizens, NRC, and Citizen Amendment Act, CAA, in 2019. And the less said of Amnesty International, the better it is. Supporting terrorists has been a recurring theme with Amnesty. In 2015, a senior employee of Amnesty International was found to have undeclared private links to men alleged to be key players in a secretive network of global Islamists. Later, an Amnesty-sponsored speaker was seen openly gloating over the 9/11 attacks, declaring them as sweet revenge. No wonder Geeta Sahgal, the head of Amnesty's gender unit, had a public spat with their management over Amnesty's linkages to a pro-jihadi group. Her parting comments on Amnesty speak a lot about the group's credibility, where she describes them as suffering from ideological bankruptcy and misogyny. Ditto for Human Rights Watch, whose baseless propaganda and lies against India have never stood the rigorous test of law and factual evidence. Yes, this is the same Human Rights Watch who had gotten the flack globally for advising governments not to move their trade from China to India, alleging fabricated human rights violations. India Civil Watch International, too, has been famous for its anti-India, anti-Hindu rhetoric promoting casteism, and its members are connected to Pakistan's ISI network. Ambedkar King Study Circle is generally started in any institution to create caste issues and target faculties and students by teasing or provoking them. Remember the beef festival they conducted at IIT Madras? They even tried force-feeding a Jain student with beef. Evidently, with shady partner organizations like these, Savera needs no enemies to blow their poppycock report out of the water. Why Savera and why now? A random check at the social media profiles of Savera indicates that this syndicate has been recently birthed, and this report is their only offering. The question remains, what was the need for this new front? Is it because most of their partners and their frontmen have been exposed as Islamists, jihadi supporters, or regime change operators? The anti-Hindu conspirators in the U.S. are still smarting from the loss of the Cisco case and the blowback it received during the obliteration of SB 403. And as their effort to divide Hindus on caste is not taking off as planned, is Savera then their new line of attack, wherein they take on the mother organizations like the VHP and the RSS in America, to weaken them and dilute their commitment towards safeguarding Hinduism? Cabals like Savera have realized that it might be difficult to push for regime change in India, what with PM Modi expected to return for a third term with a whopping majority. Is that why Savera is sullying the collective reputations of BJP, RSS, and VHP abroad as forces of majoritarianism? Entirely possible. The leftists across the world have realized that their divisive agenda is being rejected across the globe. Instead of course correction, they have pivoted to oppose every political leader who has comprehensively defeated their ideology electorally. Naturally, I don't find it surprising that PM Modi has been unfairly bandied in the Savera report, with Jair Bolsonaro, Viktor Orban, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Recep Tayyip Erdogan, all political leaders that have comprehensively taken a stand against the left liberals. Maybe that is precisely why the Savera report carries the forward by a bunch of wokes who have zero knowledge of the ground conditions in India. The editing panel has on board Peter Bionart, editor-at-large, Jewish Currents, Bill Fletcher, Jr., Senior Scholar, Institute for Policy Studies, IPS. Tarso Luis Ramos, Executive Director, Political Research Associates, PRA. Grisa Martinez Rosas, Executive Director, United We Dream, UWD. Montague Simmons, Director of Strategic Partnerships, Movement for Black Lives, M4BL, and Carla F. Wallace, co-founder, Showing Up for Racial Justice, SURJ. A dubious collection of Hamas normalizers, BLM, activists and illegal immigration supporters, who are fronting this shrill pack of lies against VHP and India with overused cliches like fight against fascism and authoritarianism. And what is the public standing of this lot? Well, Peter Beinart's X timeline is rife with Hamas play-acting videos, now commonly known as Pallywood, where Palestinian actors play-act to create fake videos of IDF's transgressions and blame the Israelis. No wonder Josh Hammer, editor-at-large for Newsweek, calls Beinart one of the foremost leftist capo Jews in the Western world, and scum incarnate. Moreover, this bunch's non-commitment to the Severa report is evident from the fact that none of their X timelines harp on the importance of the report, with some casually sharing the tweet from Severa barely once. Yes, this report is more about Andhera, darkness, than Severa light. The truth is that Severa is simply the new front of the same old bunch of tricksters, probably trying to milk the regime change funds, which will now flow in plenty on the eve of the upcoming general elections in India in May 2024. Hack jobs like these Severa reports are nothing but a part of the left-liberal value chain of making easy money by vitiating the atmosphere and targeting the docile minority of Hindus in America. As Eric Hoffer correctly articulates, every cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket.